Is your intellect why you're miserable? Let's talk about that. Tio, good to have you back here. What's the answer to that question?
Mind, which can also be called intellect, your genius, and the source of your skepticism, rationality, logic, and all of these things. I come from that background. I have been a hardcore skeptic, cynic, atheist, someone who's very intellectual, very good at software, and I was often even called genius. So, like, I do relate to all of those labels. And over the past decade of my journey, after my own awakening into higher consciousness, I did realize that pretty much all of them in different ways were the source of a lot of suffering. Primarily because I did not have the emotional intelligence to support that level of intellect. And in one of the primary spiritual systems or consciousness systems that I have studied, it talks about the path to awakening to the highest levels of consciousness. And it does lay out a sequence. And in that sequence, it clearly states that developing the higher heart or higher emotional center is extremely important before you can develop your higher intellectual center, which is what we can in common terms call the genius state, someone who is extremely intelligent. But if someone is born extremely intelligent, or they have developed their intelligence or focused on developing only their intelligence without that higher emotional center, it is the reason why that person is suffering from cynicism, nihilism, depression, anxiety, and like just thinking that the world is fucked.
It's crazy. I have seen a meme on the internet where it essentially says more or less the reason why you can't stand the world is because you're so smart that you can see it as it actually is. What I'm hearing when you say all that, though, is that it actually is the reverse. You are probably miserable because you're so smart. You cannot see the world for what it really is. You see a part of it, the part of it that the intellect perceives and analyzes, that can make you cynical if that's all that you see. But if you're not connected to the emotional and not able to connect to these higher level spiritual functions, of course you're going to stay in a place of cynicism. Is that what you're saying, more or less?
Somewhat, but I want to nuance it and I want to clarify it, because I loved especially that quote that you said, right? Like, that is the identity of the skeptic and the cynic, is that I know better, I can't be fooled, I can't be taken for a ride. Look at all of these idiots. Of course, I'm smarter than them, I'm better than them. I would never fall for that. And then you have a cult like NXIVM, about which there was a very big show on Hulu called 𝗓𝗏, which was literally a cult that was led by a genius and that attracted people who are extremely rational and intellectual and skeptical. Why does that happen? How do those people, like, you, when you look at that, when you watch that show, right, the literal question you're asking is, how could someone so smart fall for something like that? And every skeptic and cynic who watches that show, and I've seen them and I've discussed the show with them, they're like, that would never happen to me. And you know what? They were actually already part of a cult, but they would not even accept, they would not see the mirror to that. So, and cult is a very specific example. It's not even about the cult, but the idea is that I'm too smart to fall for something so stupid. But the thing is that you're not emotionally smart, and that's why you, even with all your intelligence, you can still fall for something so stupid. Where I want to nuance and clarify it a bit more is that I was not just saying about being smart or being connected to your emotions. Is that there are certain emotions which you need to develop, which most people are not born with. Like, some people are born genius, some people are born very loving and compassionate or joyful or
Yeah.
whatever, right? And I'm not even talking on those specific emotions, but there are just the way that we can develop our minds and our intelligence and our genius. We also do need to develop our heart as the foundation for that genius, because it's not just that I see the world for what it is, or even the reverse of that is that, yes, your intelligence does allow you to see the world for what it is, but your heart cannot support seeing what you're seeing. And that is where people enter into cynicism and depression, is that if your heart was evolved enough, you would see the world for what it is, but you would not be destroyed by it. And that's what happens, is that there is literally a fracture that happens within the psyche when you see the raw truth of the world. When you get out of your illusions and your numbing, and you just see the world for what it is. Because yes, the world is a very dark place. It's not only that, and that's another problem of cynics and skeptics, is that
Yeah.
our focus gets locked into what is wrong with the world. And that's again because the heart has not been developed. But when the heart has been developed, you get to see the world for what it is, but you get to focus on the full picture, that there's a lot of beauty and love and amazing things in this world worth living for.
I want to go down that rabbit hole quite quickly, but before we do it, I have to speak on the behalf of many people who are watching this about the tone behind what you're talking about. I, like you, had my entire life, especially when I was younger, people telling me I was smart. And because I have strong rational thinking skills, and those are skills that I chose to develop, I can relate to people who hear about cults or about all sorts of leadership types or gurus, and I'm rolling my eyes inside thinking these people that are following so and so are ridiculous. That would never happen. Okay, that sort of person is me. Exactly. For
Mhm.
many people who have a high level intellectual functioning, though, our early lives can be tough because anytime you are outside of the mean, you're going to suffer because of it. People that look particularly unattractive often suffer because of that. People who are extremely attractive definitely receive benefits because of it, but they also have strong negatives attached to it. At least in the United States and in many parts of the world outside of the United States, being extremely smart can help you when it comes to grades, and it may give you, when you're a child, theoretically better life prospects, but you get bullied a lot. People will make you an outcast. And so you have to hold on to something in order to make it through that and to have hope and to give you belief that you can somehow make it in this world despite the suffering that you're experiencing just as a child. By the way, in my case, the intellectual capacity that I had alienated me from my own family. My
Mhm.
adoptive family is African American. And I had cousins who would invite my sister and the rest of my family over to dinner all the time or to the movies after church or for to go to the park and hang out and explicitly exclude me. And it was so bad that eventually my mother did ask her sister, why were you and your family members always excluding Scott from stuff? It was weird. And they
Mhm.
said, well, he's so smart, it was like he was white. So I was explicitly rejected because of my intellect, which they associated with me being an outsider, someone of a different race. I don't know what they thought I would be like looking the way I do, by the way. I mean, but we'll leave that for a whole other conversation. Uh, Keeping it real, you learn to hold on to this thing. This is your life raft in very turbulent oceans. And that's all that some people feel that they have. Not only that, but when you are in that situation and you're feeling abused or oppressed because of your intellect, you become very keenly aware of the anti intellectualism that a lot of populations have in the
Uh,
West and in other countries as well. And so, what I hear when you say that, even though I know it's not what you're saying, Tio, but I'm sure folks watching this will hear it too, at least some of them, is anti intellectualism coming up. Oh my God. Not only are we getting anti intellectualism, not only are we getting anti what I am from the idiot masses, but I'm Also getting it from two people who actually are intellectuals. How do you respond to that? How do you help them deal with that?
Let me just make my position clear. Like, I love the intellect and I love the mind. I love the genius mind. And my work is focused on developing the genius mind, but helping people to support that genius mind with a heart that doesn't get crushed, an ego and a personality and a soul that doesn't get crushed because you can suddenly see everything. Because that's the journey I went through myself. Right? Like I was considered as a genius by many people, and I could see the world for what it was, and that is what made me very cynical. And at the same time, like it did really crush me from within because I couldn't see any hope. Like, how can you have hope in a world where there is so much war and bigotry and racism and violence and everything that exists, right? And like the amount of chaos and the amount of disharmony, like, how can you not be cynical in this world if you truly see it, right? How can you not be cynical? And that was literally my journey over the past decade. I tried to bury my head in the sand. That did not really work. Then I tried all kinds of things, and I entered into a phase of deep depression where, prior to my awakening, I was numbing myself. So even though I could see the world, I was not feeling anything. I was just smoking pot all day. And I think that's, again, something a lot of people today, especially, are doing because it's been legalized now. And it was
Yeah.
legalized when I was living in Seattle. So I could just, go to a dispensary, buy pot, and smoke all day, literally legally, even at my job. And I just do not need to feel anything. And I could just focus on my work, be cynical, blah, blah. And then, at the age of 24, when I had my awakening, all of a sudden, I did not want to numb myself and I could see the pain of the world. And it put me into a 3-year long depression, deep depression, I would say, even to the point of being suicidal. And, like, it was not actually acting on it, but considering it very deeply and being on the edge of it many times. And yeah, I want to highlight that because that's where my journey started. That's where my journey started. And I started realizing and learning that that's one way of looking at the world. And that is, where my journey started of developing my heart and the higher emotional center, as it's called in the system. It was realizing that you can see all of that and feel very differently about it. When that insight clicked for me, it wasn't just reading it, but there was something in me that said that it's actually true. I can see everything and I can feel very differently about it. That was the journey where my cynic started dying. And today, I consider myself as someone who is a skeptic, but who's no longer a cynic. And some hints of cynicism may come, but I catch them very quickly, and I know how to move on from them instantly. Because that's not who I want to be. That's not what I want to feed. And having been on both ends of the spectrum, I know that it's a better intellectual position. Like, a lot of people believe that cynicism is a very superior intellectual position because you can't be taken for a ride. You are not stupid to ignore whatever is happening in the world. I don't ignore what's happening in the world. I just choose to have a very different attitude towards it. And my attitude is, let's do something about it. I have power. Let me use that power to do something about it. Because the cynic is resigned. They're literally just letting the world fall apart. What if all the cynics woke up tomorrow, today or tomorrow, and said, okay, let's all do something about this.
Yeah.
And, let's just name a few of the higher emotions. The first is love, and that includes compassion. And I say compassion specifically because if you are really intelligent, but you don't have compassion towards people who are not that intelligent, and I'm not negging on people who aren't intelligent, it's just a fact. Like, there are different levels of emotional intelligence, cerebral intelligence, physical intelligence. Like, I'm terrible with the physical intelligence. I don't know how to lift things. I don't have great stamina, but there are people who've mastered their bodies and can do amazing things with it. That's one type of intelligence. The people who are extremely compassionate and emotionally intelligent, and the people who are cerebrally intelligent, which we are all familiar with. So I name compassion because it's one thing to be intelligent and to see that other people are not that intelligent. But if you look at them as stupid and you put them down and you cannot relate to them at a human level, there's something wrong with you, and you need to have that mirror and
Yeah.
look at yourself and be like, yeah, why am I doing that? Why am I really doing that? And for me, I got my answer, and I don't necessarily want to share the answer because each person needs to understand it from a reflective point of view, not just me telling them this is what's wrong with you, but like actually feel what is wrong with that. When you put an entire population beneath you because of one specific factor. I live in Brazil, and over here I live in a rural area, and even like the schools are very low quality compared to the schools I have been to, and even better schools that exist in the world. So again, the level of education is not very high, the level of cerebral intelligence is not very high. But when I look at the emotional intelligence of the people here, by default, like this is just who they are as people, they're pretty much born like that. I feel inferior many times because I'm like,
Mhm.
wow, like these people, the way they know how to love and support each other, I want to learn that. Like that's what I've been doing over the past decades. Like I've been learning from them. It's like what it actually means to be part of a community and support each other, and so many more things, right? So that's why I name compassion specifically, because it's intelligence. Compassion is a form of intelligence. But then you have hope, and this is a very tricky word because there is such a thing as lower hope and higher hope. And lower hope, it's kind of wishful thinking. Okay, so I'm not referring to wishful thinking when I say hope. I'm talking about higher hope, which is rooted in power. It's like I have hope because I have power and because people have power. And if people, powerful people unite, there is real hope. It's obvious. Why wouldn't there be hope when everyone is putting all their efforts to make something happen with intelligence, emotional and cerebral and physical? Of course, there's hope. But the cynic is completely disconnected from that because they're focused on what's not possible,
Yeah.
because no one is using their power, right? Then you have the trickiest one, which is faith. And again, I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm not talking about, again, hoping for everything to work out for the best. I'm talking about trust. And this is something that I think as a species is deeply fractured within us, especially because a lot of the faith is religious. And religious faith is not actual trust. It's wishful thinking, once again. It's hoping that there's someone who is just looking out for you because you're being a good person. I am really not talking about that. I'm talking about trust that is so fundamental. Like, do you have trust in yourself? Do you have trust in life? Do you have trust in existence? And I feel like, again, it's very tough to understand this from an intellectual perspective because how can you trust people? Most people are so untrustworthy. I get it. And I'm not talking about circumstantial trust. I'm not talking about trust as it relates to a specific person, as it relates to a specific situation. I'm talking about just a fundamental trust that exists in within a person. And the mind cannot really understand that because the mind only knows trust that is relational, that is circumstantial. And this is a trust that comes from somewhere way beyond the mind. So these are the three key higher emotions, which then lead to more profound emotions such as unconditional joy, unconditional peace, which I think every skeptic and cynic is really seeking for. Like everyone wants to experience peace because being a cynic is a deeply anxious state. It's a deeply uh, unpeaceful state. And I know being a cynic, peace was literally my number one desire. I just wanted to feel peace within myself. And I do. Like I don't just feel peace within myself. I have become a beacon of peace. It's literally the thing that most people say to me that they experience with me is that they just feel like I radiate peace and they just feel peaceful around me. Even if they come as stress, like they just come into my presence and they just feel peaceful. Like that's the level of peace I have mastered, but it did not happen because I'm so intelligent. I learned how to use my heart in the right way. And I'm not talking on the physical heart, I'm talking on the spiritual heart, the emotional heart, whatever you want to call it. Like there are lots of different names for it. That's why I really like the term higher emotional center. It takes it out of the usual context that people use.
I want to take some time to go into depth about each of those three baseline higher heart/spirit based intelligences. But before we get there, I want to step and explore cynicism just a little bit more deeply. Cynicism is, in the framework that I teach people, what I call the underworld myth. The underworld myth is one of 5 toxic myths that correspond to genres of Greek mythology that actually explain thought patterns that people get caught in that can keep them from moving forward into alignment with their own highest self, their purpose, and what their true life mission is, as well as these other things that are the higher level emotions and states that people get in, joy and peace in particular. And the underworld myth is exemplified by someone who is trapped in a state of mental, emotional, or spiritual despair or hopelessness. I always tell people it's marked by cynicism. What is the relationship between cynicism and the underworld? Well, in ancient Greek myths, when you died, if you were a hero, you got a special dispensation and you went to paradise. Or you might even get transmogrified into a deity. If you were particularly evil, you were sent to Tartarus, which was their version of hell, where you were given some deliciously ironic torture for the rest of eternity. But the overwhelming 99% of all mortals went to this place called the Fields of Asphodel, which was the core underworld. The Field of Asphodel was just this dark gray, featureless plain. It was like sort of a dust covered, maybe little tufts of grass here and there that were kind of withered and brown, twilight place. And above were the rocks of the underworld that separated the fields from the mortal world. And the souls just sort of gradually withered away into these colorless, mindless, thoughtless, empty shades. It was not torture to be there. You weren't conscious enough to even be tortured. It was a nether existence, sort of this twilight state of being that had no hope of ever ending. It was fundamentally drab and dull forever. The very definition of what we've talked about in some of our earlier discussions about the fear of eternity and that being something that ultimately becomes boring. Well, if you're tortured as we discussed then, or if you are in paradise forever and ever, it's going to become boring over time. But if you were in these fields of asphodel, it was boring from the second you walked in. You didn't even have the relief of a few million years of feeling happy or miserable. And that is really what cynicism is. It is a suffering, but in a way, as I've experienced cynicism, because as a former skeptic and as a longtime hardcore atheist, that cynical view of the world was exactly the one that I carried. I didn't feel tortured by it. I felt more like it was just this gray future that the world had in front of it, where okay, things were bad, but they were always going to stay bad. And putting effort into making things better might be a little bit of a momentary salve, but the future was just going to be this grim sort of dystopian thing.
Funny it is, in a very sad way, that that is not considered to be torture, right? And I feel like
Yeah,
everything that you described has parallels to living life. It's not just the afterlife, but like 99% of the masses are living a very drab existence in the zoo, as you have described before.
right.
And there are people who are heroes and they're going to paradise, they're living paradise because they feel great about themselves, they feel
Yeah.
fulfilled, they feel joyful, they feel peaceful. And then there are a lot of people who are doing evil and they are suffering because when you're doing evil, there are consequences that people like you're surrounded by people who are not trustworthy, who are betraying you, who are attacking you, blah blah blah. Blah. That is its own kind of hell. But talking about the masses, it's like, and that I feel is where the cynics live primarily, is that gray reality is only less torture than having to feel all the emotion. So I just turn off my emotions, I go into my mind, and if I suffer because the world is such a terrible place, but at least I'm not feeling more miserable. So I've just gone into this grayness, given up, resigned, the world sucks.
And that's exactly why this thought pattern or this particular internal myth that people have about the world and their place in it and their future is so dangerous because it's insidious. It doesn't feel acute. It's
Mhm,
more like this thing that gradually over time becomes um becomes normalized.
mhm,
You it might seem merely a little bit like an everyday boring or minor sort of blah on day one. It might seem a little bit more on day two, but then an entire lifetime later, you realize you have become self acclimated to a torture that you've created through your own worldview.
mhm.
So I really wanted to underscore the point and just make sure that it doesn't go unstated in a way that is clear and unequivocal. Cynicism is torture. Cynicism is suffering. Cynicism is its own version of hell. You may think you're seeing the world clearly, but you're really only seeing it in shades of gray. And by missing out on color, you really are inflicting punishment upon yourself. It's no way to be. And that's the danger. If you think that because you're smart or because you have this clarity about what the world is like because of your intellect, you really are digging your own grave right into Hades.
I love that. I love that framing so much. And what I will add to it is that people think that paradise is where you only feel good. And I'm talking the higher emotional center as though, like you have love, hope, and trust slash faith, and everything is resolved. But paradise is, as we have discussed before in previous episodes of the same series, true paradise is where you experience agony and ecstasy.
Yeah.
If you're not feeling intense emotions, you're dead. You're experiencing a living death. That's the emptiness that cynicism creates, is that you just stop feeling anything. You go into nihilism, nothing means anything, and is just a living death. And that is truly a hell. I have lived through that hell, so I know that it's hell. I know that coming out on the other side, the paradise that I experience now, is not that I don't have pain. It's not that I don't have agonizing moments and difficult challenges. It's like that is my life is full of that, but I freaking love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. I feel alive because of it. And that's why I love that you use the term heroes go to paradise,
Mm.
right? It's not good people go to paradise.
Right,
Heroes go to paradise.
right. And the ancient Greeks were very clear about that.
You're talking about eternity and millions of years, but living 100 years in that gray hell is an eternity in itself. Like if your
Yeah.
life is that, it's 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 its own hell because it's like an eternity. Like really think about 100 years living like that. That it's scary to me. If my life becomes like that for 100 years, that's an eternity for me because it's millions of seconds, right? You're just talking about scales, relativity, like
Yeah.
millions of years or millions of seconds living in that gray hell. I would much rather prefer feeling.
Also, why I call cynicism a toxic myth via this underworld myth framework is because it's also using the more common modern sense of what a myth is, a total lie. If you look at the bigger picture, actually, cynicism isn't justified. I'll talk about this just with regards to one issue: slavery. Slavery used to be a commonly accepted way of experiencing the human condition throughout the entire globe. Now, I'm not saying that slavery doesn't exist in pockets of the planet right now. It very much does. But let's face it, globally, slavery is, from an ethical perspective and pretty much from the perspective of every government, even the most repressive in the world, viewed as a complete moral abomination. It is a crime. People known as slavers are sent in practically every justice system to very hard punishment, and it sends you and anyone associated with you into a complete spiral of shame. Sexual exploitation, right? That was something that for many thousands of years was part of the tolerated human condition. Now it's considered, again, something that someone should be punished very gravely for. And if you're associated with someone who was a sexual exploiter, you actually, in common moral view now, should suffer punishment for that alone, even if you never were actually involved in the sexual exploitation. And so the cynicism that says, oh, the world will never get better, things will never change, is not founded on truth. It's only founded on a particular type of version of truth, which is that what I'm experiencing through my own self-created reality is all that there is to the world. And for whatever time frame that I view as the lens through which I view humanity. But humanity has been around for over 100,000 years, and even recorded history has gone on for thousands of years. And there have been general improvements, and we have no reason to believe that these improvements are going to stop. So cynicism is fundamentally based on a lie. And it's my position that when you live your life based on a lie, you're going to suffer because you're not aligned with truth.
The cynic chooses to focus on the truth that reinforces its belief, that keeps the ego alive to protect you from the deep pain that your heart has not evolved enough to experience. Because to feel real unconditional love and hope and trust, you need to have a very big heart. And that heart needs to have the capacity to feel pain and disappointment. It's like, why would I want to feel that? That's what the ego says. That's what the cynic says. It's not worth it. I can just be in the miserable gray fields rather than feeling love and pain, agony and ecstasy. I would rather just live a muted existence where I'm mildly suffering rather than feel these big emotions. It's extremely scary for the mind to feel the big emotions. And that, there's, it's a very harsh word I'm going to use, but there's a lot of cowardice in cynicism. And I say this to my past self too. It's not like I'm excluding myself from it.
This is a case where I feel like strong words and a lack of subtlety are totally appropriate. It is cowardly. It's cowardly because you're not facing your true self. Anytime you're stuck in cynicism, I'll throw that onto the street right now. You are living as a coward. Man up, face yourself, and start to do something about it. But Tio, let me ask you before we start to move into love, hope, and trust, how do you know if you really are a cynic?
I'll give you a fantastic example that's very relevant to the conversation. Okay. So when you, Scott, were saying slavery doesn't exist, it's been largely eradicated, I'll tell you what a cynic would have thought in that moment. Because my cynic or my skeptic or my farmer, it's always there, right? I just choose not to feed it, believer. But the immediate response of my cynic, so if you had this and you truly believe this and you identified with it, your response would have been, have you looked at the corporate world? Are you like, that is slavery? Have you looked at the masses, the sheeple, like all of these terms exist? Who has created them? It's humans. It's cynics who've created them. Of course, slavery still exists. That's the way the cynic thinks. That's the quickest way to identify it. But there are so many markers, right? Like right now I'm writing a book about the whole topic, which is about the skeptic's path to higher consciousness. And, I was creating a scale, like a self-evaluation for the degree of cynicism that you have. And on the lowest level is the healthy skepticism, which is looking for proof and not simply believing something, which I strongly support. So that would be level 1. But you're open for the proof. You've not pre-decided that whatever proof I'm given, I'm just going to disregard it and hold on to my opinion, which goes to level 3 and level 4 cynic is like, they are not interested in proof. Whatever proof you give to them will immediately be negated by saying corporate slavery still exists. Look at the masses, they are slaves of the government, blah, 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 blah. Like, it doesn't matter what you say to them, they always have a negative, pessimistic view of the world. And then you've got a level 5, which is, I love the term that AI came up with. It's the uh, nihilist absurdist.
That is a
Absurdism
great
is
term.
absurdism is a philosophy in which, like, it just says that nothing has any actual meaning in life and everything is made up. And that really is the place of maximum suffering. Is if you truly believe, and I've been there, I have been there. And when I did truly believe that everything is meaningless, I wanted to kill myself. What's the point? Why am I suffering for a second longer? If I just end my life, everything ends. There is no afterlife. There's nothing. All of that is bullshit anyway. So I'm just going to go into the dust. Why am I living this human experience and suffering? And that is the biggest contradiction of the nihilist absurdist. Right? Like, why don't you immediately kill yourself if that's what you believe? If life has no meaning, and I'm not saying go kill yourself, but I'm just questioning, like, you have a contradiction within you. Every nihilist absurdist has a contradiction within themselves, that if you truly believe that, there's no reason to keep living, but you do keep living because something in you believes something completely different. And that is where we come to the realization that the cynic is only and always a part of you. And if you choose to identify your full self with the cynic, it's an option, but the other parts of you don't die away. The optimist doesn't die. The spiritualist doesn't die. The hopeful one doesn't die. Like, all of those still exist within you. You're just choosing to give all your energy to the cynic. All your focus is on the cynic's perspective, the cynic's beliefs, and the cynic's opinion, right? Like, that's the only thing that's happening for a cynic that's different from anyone else, is that they've just fully bought into one part of themselves, and the other parts are the ones that are still keeping you alive, because they're like, okay, you can invest fully into that, but we know that there is still a point of living. There is still a point of living. So how do you like, coming back to the question, like, these are some ways of identifying how cynical you are, because I wouldn't say it's black and white. You are a cynic or you're not a cynic. We all have a cynic within us. The real question is, what's the degree of cynicism in your life? And for that, one of the things you can do is, subscribe to my upcoming book, where I will be creating the scale and diving deep into each of the topics. But generally speaking, it's like, how pessimistic are you about the world? Like, that's the most direct question you can ask yourself. And I would also say that many people are very split. They may be very cynical in one aspect of life, and they may be very hopeful in another aspect of life. They may be very trusting in another aspect of life. So I did this experiment with the AI where, it asked me if, based on the scale that we created, if I want to do an analysis of a fictional character, and it gave me a couple of options, and one of them was Ron Swanson from Parks and Recreation. I don't know if you watched that show, but I love that show, and that character is a phenomenal example, because it's a guy who is extremely, like, he is a level 5 cynic when it comes to the government and systems. Okay. He works in the government, but he works in the government so that he can prevent the government from doing its usual shit.
Right.
He is extremely cynical about the government. But when like based on the AI analysis, or like when it comes to personal relationships and people that he trusts, he's a level 1 cynic. He genuinely, like, he usually just by default believes in them and trusts them and is optimistic about them. So again, like, there are some people who are level 5 cynics in all perspectives, but that is rare. That's much rarer than most of the people who will be level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cynical about different aspects of life. And each aspect of life, you can actually choose to be a level 4, 3, 5 cynic, or you can choose to be level 1 and level 0. So I introduced to level 0. The AI came up with level 1 to 5. I introduced to level 0. And the idea of level 0 is that I am inherently optimistic. I'm inherently believing that things are in my favor, that things are positive. And I'm keeping my skeptic alive and I'm listening to it, but I'm not always buying into it. I'm not always feeding it. Okay, so the way finally we reconciled the AI and me was that have a level 0 heart and have a level 1 mind. Keep your heart open, positive, because that's what makes life amazing. But don't stop listening to your mind. Like, don't become a complete, like you said, go hug a cobra. Like, that's not what we want to go and do. Like, the mind is there for a reason. Listen to it, but don't believe everything that it says, because the mind lies a lot. A lot. The mind lies a lot.
Tio, I'm going to just ask anyone who is watching right now to put in the comments what level of a cynic you think you are. Are you a level 0 cynic who is almost unequivocally all the time positive? Are you a level 5? Love to hear your thoughts on that. And then also whether you agree with what Tio just said. Is your level of cynicism something that you can change? Because what you've just said is a powerful point for people to remember, Tio. Cynicism is something that you have the power to control. And if you have the intellectual capacity to be someone who is foundationally in, intellectual, someone who is foundationally smart, then you have the ability to look at your behavior, hopefully, and then take the steps to move it. At least you have the ability to conceptualize this. You might need some help along the way. That's why I recommend that anyone who's watching at this point go right down to the caption and look at your website that is pointed to there and check out more about this book, as well as sign up to your email list, all that sort of stuff, so they can stay on top of this, as I want you to do with mine too, by the way. It's also below in the caption. But that's even more importantly, just something to remember that you have the power over managing. And then finally, I wanted to thank you for honing in on the answer to the earlier question that I had, which was about anti-intellectualism. You essentially said you can and should maintain a healthy skepticism. Just don't let that skepticism turn into something that is all encompassing and that you can't escape, that becomes this literal Hades for yourself. But seriously, we're not advocating for gullibility and believing any old thing here. It doesn't have to be a binary, and that's something that people can forget. You don't have to be a complete cynic, or you don't have to be a complete cobra hugger. You can be somewhere in between. And that's a healthy way to walk through life in the spirit of self-examination and self-growth, which takes me to the next point, which is the emotional intelligences that you talked about: love, hope, and faith or trust. I'm going to dive into love and compassion first with a little bit of an intro. One of the things that you just said that I love is that being non-high IQ isn't necessarily the best thing in the world. So a lot of people that I've known in my journey have made it a point to ridicule people that they view as stupid, or I can't hang around all these people, they're grindingly idiotic, or for instance, I was watching a reality TV show years ago with someone, and the one character in this that I really was rooting for was not by anyone's standard the brightest light in the tool shed, but he was the one that had the nicest heart. He was from a rural part of the United States and had not been exposed to a lot, in addition to just not being very intellectually sophisticated. And he had met a gay person for the first time on the show, and he was asking questions that the rest of the cast were ridiculing as stupid, and he framed them in a way that made him seem less than brilliant. But I didn't see this as ridiculous at all. I thought this was heroic because within being who and what he was, he wanted truth. And once
Right.
he got the answers and understood more, he easily opened up to that person that was on the show, as opposed to brilliant people. I read an article in the New York Times recently who was arguing, and he was a brilliant philosopher and theoretician and business person. He was brilliant in all these areas someone like me can only begin to wrap my mind around, arguing essentially for replacing democracy with an authoritarian corporatism. Uh, That to me is evil, and someone using their intellect for evil means. A total example of someone who could maybe have benefited from a little bit less intellect and a lot more love. Denigrating stupidity, hey, stupidity, lack of intellectual capacity, low IQ, or different types of IQ, that's something you can't control. But how you operate in relationship to other people, how you develop things like love and compassion, that is something that you can control unless you're seriously disordered. And even then, you can fake it and act that way. And to me, the judgment that I put on someone, and I recommend anyone that is in my orbit to put upon someone who's bright but evil, is much, much more severe than those that simply lack the capacity but have heart.
Mhm. So this is where I will introduce another powerful question and then dive into it. Are you truly a skeptic, or are you a cynic in denial? Okay. And now let's define skepticism and cynicism very specifically. So skepticism, a skeptic is someone who is searching for truth. That's the actual definition of a skeptic. It's someone who's searching for truth. They are not believing someone by default. They're looking for evidence of truth. Everything else is someone who's pre-decided that the truth doesn't exist. They, it's just different levels of that, but they are not actually open for truth. They're not open to be wrong. And so when you talk about stupidity, right? A true skeptic is stupid. They ask stupid questions because they are seeking truth. They want to get to the bottom of something, and the best way to do that is to ask stupid questions. A true skeptic, an intelligent skeptic, knows that they're never the smartest person in the room. They're asking questions to people who are smarter than them, and those questions will look stupid to the smart person. But if it's a truly empathic, smart person, they're like, yeah, this person wants to learn, I want to help them. They're not going to judge them for asking stupid questions. They're like, you're actually asking the right question. You're asking an intelligent question. And for the cynic, and even an intelligent question will look stupid because they're like, why don't you already know this? That's the
Yeah.
cynic's idea. You should already know something. But a true skeptic doesn't know everything, doesn't pretend to know everything, doesn't claim to know everything. They stay open and they stay stupid and they ask the right questions. And many of those questions are very stupid questions in the eyes of a cynic. So, are you truly a skeptic, or are you a cynic in denial?
And what are you seeking when you ask questions? Are you seeking to set the other person up to look more stupid than you? In other words, are you driven by, again, ego, which is in this case utterly blocking love and compassion? Or, right, are you seeking to be proven wrong or to have a genuine enlightenment. That is one of the hardest things about working in large organizational, professional America, at least to me, which is that it is full of people who are smart by IQ measures, and they've been told that they're smart, and they have the degrees that quote unquote prove to the world that they're smart. But there's this constant rat race, not just for more money or for a better office or for a bigger car or more title, but to prove that you're the smartest person. And it's boring. And it does actually separate one from love and compassion, because really the spirit of love is the spirit of connection and proving that you're smarter than someone, smarter than the entirety of humanity, which is what the cynic is essentially positioning themselves as, is inherently an act of slicing yourself away from connection with other human beings.
And that's literally what happens. Like, why are we in a loneliness and isolation crisis? It's because most people have siloed themselves because they cannot relate to other people. They are so in their mind, and it goes directly to our original question: is your mind the reason you're miserable? Absolutely, 100%. Yes, because you cannot use your heart anymore to relate to other people, to connect with other people, to let them be different. And you have to have this intellectual superiority that makes you think that you're a better person. Not at all. You're actually a pretty shit person if you think that you're better than others. And
Yeah.
I have studied psychology and psychotherapy in a pretty good depth. I'm not saying super advanced, but quite a lot. And a lot of the times, when your identity is tied to intellectual superiority, is because emotionally you feel inferior. And it goes back to the example you were saying, when you're bullied in school, when you're excluded in school, you want to belong. Every child wants to belong to the group. And when you're excluded, it creates a serious wound. And what is the only thing you're left with? I will prove how smart I am and how much I'm better than these people. And I don't need them. And blah, 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 blah. And then you end up completely lonely, isolated, depressed. So stop trying to prove that you're better than others, that you don't fit in because of how smart you are and how stupid the masses are. Wake up and realize that you are as human as everyone else. And everyone is special in their own way. Everyone has their own intelligence. Whether they use it or not is a whole different thing. And even if they don't use it, firstly, you don't have to accept and love everyone like in this very, you know, positivistic way. But the love that we're talking about, so let's actually come to the topic. The love that we're talking about is not, again, the lower typical love that is exemplified in Hollywood and Bollywood and all the other books and all the other examples that we have of love. It's not about romantic love. It's not even about platonic love. Love, higher love, it's a state of being. And that, the best term for that is connection. Are you connected or are you not connected? Are you connected or are you disconnected? Your ability to connect with people is love. That is love. And I'm telling you from experience, when I came to Brazil 11 years ago, I did not know how to love at that level. I could connect to some people who resonated for me, and I would judge most of the other people in the same way that we've been describing throughout this episode. And it was really a journey for me to learn how to love, meaning learn how to connect with anyone, really. Like, doesn't mean that I enjoy the person, doesn't mean that I like the person, but can I love them? Can I connect with them? Can I share humanity with them? Can I relate to them? That's compassion. That's empathy.
One thing my own very similar journey has taught me is that love is, in one sense, a feeling state or an emotion. But more to what you're talking about, love is a skill, an emotional and a spiritual skill that I needed to develop. Now, because it is associated with emotion, I discounted it and took forever to wrap my mind around the truth about it. A wise martial art dojo owner that I know once used to say, if you want love, give love. If you want friendship, be a friend. If you want to lead, be willing to be led. All of these sorts of things. And there's real truth in that. When you look at yourself and say, am I operating from a place of love, as opposed to disconnecting cynicism? Am I giving love, not just, as you said, this syrupy, mindless romance novel sort of state, but are
Mhm.
you expressing connection with other people, even those that you detest? Because, like it or not, those that any of us detest are walking around in this world with us. We're breathing the same air, we're eating the same food, our
Mhm.
ways of being impact each other the way that any organisms that share the planet interact with each other. I recently read that every time you drink a glass of water, you're drinking molecules that were contained within the bodies of dinosaurs. In one way or another, those people are part of us, whether we like that or not.
I just want to add that, you know, love is connection. Like that's the foundation. That's where you're beginning. And then of course you can go deeper and deeper in love. And that is where you have like, these soulmates or spiritual connections where the love is so deep because you relate and connect to that
Yeah.
person at all levels. But you don't have to relate and connect to everyone at all levels. But can you connect to them at the level of basic humanity? And that is something I truly learned in Brazil is that the people
Mm,
here, most of them, they just naturally connect with anyone and everyone. Sure, they have their issues. Like a lot of Brazil is xenophobic. So when foreigners come, they have a lot of judgment. They are pretty racist towards foreigners. But at the same time, they will still connect with you. They will still relate to you. They may not like you, but they will still connect with you and love you in that way. And
mhm.
that I'm telling you, it's a level of emotional intelligence that I have not seen in most parts of the world. It's rare, especially like at a national level. I have actually seen this in many parts of Brazil, and it's just something that's there in the culture. It's just how they are and how they are brought up. They're brought up to connect with people, to love,
Uh,
even through the dysfunction, even through the chaos. They stay connected, and that is a skill. Like to stay connected. We see divorce rates and how ugly divorces get is because people cannot stay connected anymore. They
yeah,
start hating each other so much that they just need to get away and they don't relate to that person anymore and they become enemies and they want to destroy the other person. And that's just divorce. Then you've got class wars and race wars and religion wars and all these kinds of things where people
yeah,
just cannot relate to each other at the basic level of humanity. And that is not just a sign of emotional intelligence, it's also cerebral intelligence. Like, can you actually let people have differences in opinions? Let people be different. And a lot of people can't. If you do not conform to my worldview, you're stupid. Like, that doesn't make sense. Just because you see the world differently, I'm stupid. Okay. I think you're speaking more about yourself.
very much so. I'm reading a book right now by Jordan Peterson called The 12 Rules of Life. I'm reading it because a former business partner of mine raved about it for so long that I eventually broke down and bought it. And the chapter that I'm reading today is about acknowledging that the person that you're talking to may know something that you don't. Right? Eh, That's what you're saying. Live
Mhm,
that way.
mhm. Live as a skeptic, not as a sinner.
Skepticism, because it's driving towards the truth, then seems to
Mhm,
go hand in hand with hope.
mhm. And yeah, coming to hope, right? Like there's wishful thinking, which is what most people associate hope with. And as a cynic or a skeptic, I do think let's look beyond that, because wishful thinking, while it may fuel you and drive you, it usually ends up in disappointment. And I get it, because a lot of people, their wishful thinking is not based on actual effort or power. It's rooted in just the expectation of the world to be fair and everything to work out just because that's what I want. That would be easy. That would make me feel good. So I just want it to work out. It's not based on anything that has real foundation. It's just like, I just wanted to work out. Why can't life be nice to me? Why can't the universe be nice to me? And that's not the hope that we're talking about, obviously, because that isn't real hope. It's just wishful thinking.
And I've got to say, that's the sort of quote unquote hope that gives the whole personal development, the whole spiritual development, the whole even psychotherapy space a bad name, because things like what I call Oprah style hope or Oprah style spirituality, if you manifest it or if you just write it on a piece of paper and put it on the wall, it's going to somehow magically happen. Skeptics should be rejecting that sort of thing. If you are 0 on the cynicism scale, maybe you would be willing to accept that. I hope not. Maybe that's a space where then you can engage with a little bit of your skeptical powers more deeply. But then let's talk about this other type of hope in more detail.
Yeah. So basically, it's like that's the narrative, right? Like, if you just believe, everything will work out. You can just sit on your couch and watch Netflix and expect to get $1 million in your pocket because you wrote it on a note. It's going to end up in your pocket because you believe. I'm not a fan of that idea, because yeah, you're like sitting on a couch and doing nothing. It's what is wrong with a lot of the world today. Like, that's the reason of a lot of problems, is that people just want the governments to pay them money, and that may end up being the reality because of AI and robotics and everything. But without going into that, like, let's just talk about current day scenario. People just want to be paid to exist and
Yeah.
do nothing and not contribute to society and just sit alone, depressed, suffering, miserable. Yeah, like that doesn't merit any hope, I guess. Like,
Yeah.
but again, like, there is an other state, which is you can be powerful and hopeless. And that doesn't make any sense. You can be surrounded by people who have power and you're still feeling hopeless. That is cynicism. That is cynicism destroying hope, where hope is deserved. So you have a team of the 10 smartest people in the world, and you still believe that it will not work out. That is undeserved. That is where hope is, like, there is merit for hope. And that is where it requires developing the heart, because hope comes with disappointment. Things may not work out. They may not work out in the first shot. And that is where, again, power comes and hope comes, that I don't give up in the first shot. I'm going to go till I make it work, because I know that we have the power, the intelligence, and everything that's required to make this work. It's not based on magical thinking. Although I'm like, we were kind of shitting on wishful thinking and magical thinking. Like, there is a place for that and there's a way to use that. But I feel like that's more advanced. In the typical narratives, that's not what's happening. Most
Right.
people are just in wishful thinking, but there's actual magical thinking where you can make magic happen, but the magic is based on higher dimensions of logic. Okay, so that is when you combine your higher emotional center with your higher intellectual center. When you combine your genius with the power of your heart, you can make magic happen by bending dimensions. And this is what, quantum science is coming into, is that time and space are not defined. That uh, reality is way more weird than we believe it to be currently in the masses. There are higher dimensions of existence, and there are ways that we can use those dimensions to make things happen. But that requires advanced consciousness. Like, that is higher consciousness, which is a long journey. And that's the journey I have been on. And I have seen some incredible things happen that logic truly cannot explain.
Yeah.
That it did bend reality. And I've got proof of that. I'm literally living in it right now. But, that's a story for another time. Just starting with higher hope is that it's rooted in power. It's rooted in my ability to change reality. And the more power that I develop, the more strength I develop, the more resilience I develop, I have more hope. Because I have gotten proof of how much I can make happen in my life. See, we can go back 11 years. 11 years back, there's a certain amount of hope I can have because I've still not accomplished so many other things that I did in the last 11 years. But after accomplishing all of those things, if I still remain with the same level of hope, then I'm an idiot. I'm not intelligent. Then I'm a true idiot because I'm actually ignoring the proof. I have given myself proof time and time again of how much I can accomplish. Then I deserve to have more hope because the next time I have more confidence that I can accomplish the next goal. It may be a bigger goal and may be more difficult, but I have proof of how much I've done. And I know that I can stretch my genius to a whole new level to accomplish this next challenge, this next goal. So I'm truly an idiot if I do not have hope at this stage. But everyone can have a baseline level of hope if they have survived up until this point. That's your starting point. I'm here today alive. That alone can give me hope. That's where I started. How the hell did I manage to go through 3 years of intense depression and suicidal ideation? That gives me hope. If I could go through that, it gives me hope that I can do a lot more with my life. So no matter how low you are, you can have hope, real hope, because surviving, however long you've survived, means that you have strength, you have power.
But going back to those who define their power through their intellect, I can't help but think about the underworld myth again, living in a state of mental, emotional, or spiritual hopelessness. It's marked by cynicism, but it is defined by hopelessness. And what happens to, in Greek myths, those that live in the underworld, they lose power, they lose agency. If you're in those fields of asphodel where the overwhelming majority of humans live, you don't even have what mortals in our current plane have, which is the ability to manipulate and shift the physical world or impact even your immediate family. You have nothing but just this state of shadowness. And what that's really saying is that, especially after hearing you talk about this a little bit more, it's saying when you live without hope, especially this higher level hope, you have voluntarily abdicated your power. So if you are living in a state of cynicism, there's an additional level of contradiction that adds on to what you mentioned earlier, which is that you're claiming that you have your power of intellect as something that you're holding on to and judging the world by, but at the same time, by using it to create a reality for yourself that's cynical, you're abdicating that power at the same time. And so you are moving for power and against a power. Against power. You're holding on to power while pushing it away all at once. That's a recipe for internal chaos. And internal chaos is a lot of what suffering is. Uh, how does someone, though, get to the place where they can move beyond that and begin to have faith?
It is proof. It's actually looking at the proof of how much things have changed and that we have actual real power to change reality. So this is if again we draw parallels, like we just use the example of that underworld as a metaphor. Okay, the person who's living in that great reality, what is their belief? What's their internal narrative? Is that nothing is getting better, things are only getting worse. What does that do? It kills hope. Because literally your belief is that things only get worse, right? The only way to shift that is to open your eyes and see that things also get better. And we live in that duality of things get worse and things get better. True consciousness is to be able to hold that duality and then decide where do I want to invest my energy. So if I have power, which I do, I see the reality, I see things have gotten better, I use that as proof for trust and hope to make the things that are getting worse better. That's it. It's truly as simple as that. I trust that somewhere deep within each person there is humanity. It doesn't mean that every time they will act on it. It doesn't mean that I can just trust them blindly. Even people who have demonstrated trustworthy behavior can change in an instant.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. Happens all the time. So that literally doesn't mean that you become a cynic and don't trust anyone ever. Nor does it mean that you keep trusting someone because they've shown trustworthy behavior till now. It's like that is the sweet spot of open heart, mind alive. Right? Is that even someone who has been trustworthy, they are still human. They are still they are still susceptible to the shadow forces. They are still susceptible to every single thing that every single other human can fall for.
Yeah.
It is how we are. So the reality is holding that as the truth is that nothing is black and white. Everything is colored, and we have to be able to respond to whatever happens in reality. But does it mean that we give up hope? It's a loser's bet. It's the bet that gets you depressed, that makes you anxious, that makes you want to give up on life. So why will I want to create that reality? I will hold on to hope literally during Armageddon. I will hold on to hope if World War III happens in my lifetime. I will still hold on to hope. I will not give up hope literally as long as I live and breathe. Because I know the world can change in a second.
You cannot have hope, I'm realizing as I'm listening to you, without faith, without trust, without, as you said, this understanding that as bad as things may be, change is a foundational part of the human experience and part of the, as we discussed in a prior episode, the very nature of the universal consciousness itself. And so if you have, going back to a statement we made earlier, a belief system, a way of interacting and thinking about humanity that's rooted in cynicism, especially if that cynicism is totally the result of an intellectual framework that you've put together to, for whatever reason, protect yourself, you're denying the foundational nature of the universe. You are putting your own faith in something that is an observable lie, because even death itself is change. And if you're suffering enough, death itself as a change may actually be a wonderful thing to hope for, because then that suffering may end. And so we need to be able to engage with the world as it and the universe itself and our lives as they actually are, not just as we have decided we want them to be to protect ourselves, which is the real risk of becoming a cynic and ultimately having your intellect make you miserable.
Mhm. You said that it seems impossible to have faith without hope. I would say the three are deeply interconnected because you cannot have hope and faith without love. Why? Because again, if we define love as connection, if you are disconnected from people and you're cynical about people, you don't trust people, you cannot have hope because you alone cannot change the world. You need people to change the world. You need to be connected to people to be able to
Yeah.
influence them, to be able to help them, support them, be supported, be influenced in the right direction. If you are siloed, you cannot have trust and faith and hope, because, of course, you do not believe in people and their power. You believe that everything is hopeless. So the three are completely interconnected, and it requires a very strong heart to have these three emotions. It really it is a remarkable heart that can hold these emotions, because it's so tough in the face of all the proof that goes against this. It is really tough to hold on to that and not become cynical. Like the easiest thing is to be cynical. In this world, the easiest thing is to be cynical. Is the laziest thing, is the most cowardly thing, is to be cynical. It's an act of courage, it's an act of boldness to have hope, faith, and love.
That is the most profound takeaway that I will remember this episode by. Hope, love, and faith are acts of courage. Cynicism is an act of cowardice.
And lazy. There is a laziness in it, because like you may call yourself intellectually superior, but you're not actually using your mind to its fullest capacity to actually do something with the world. Like, if you are that genius, use your genius to help make a better world. It's what people like Elon Musk are doing. Like, he has many hints of skepticism and cynicism, but overall, he's a very optimistic person, because he uses his power. He sees the power of the people around him who are constantly doing things to change the world, build solutions. Like, that's one example. Bezos is another example. A lot of people who use their power, they are optimistic because they've seen how much can happen.
I don't think either of us are saying that Elon or Bezos are perfect, but let's look at the overall picture and let's really think carefully about the reality that we're constructing from what we're seeing around us. That reclaims our power, that gets us out of the underworld of our suffering.
You can be very cynical and say that rich people are evil, money makes people evil, power corrupts. You can say all of that. And then what will you end up doing? You'll stay poor, you'll stay powerless, because you are afraid of becoming the same. If truly you have trust in yourself, in your integrity, in your conscience, you will not be afraid of money and power, and then you will use your money and power for the right things, for what you believe are the right things, because they're using it for what they believe are the right thing. There is no such thing as an objective right and wrong in this level of reality, because they are doing what they think is best for the world. They truly believe that. Whether they're right or wrong, who is to judge that? If you think that there's something different can be done, do the same. Earn that money, earn that power, earn that influence, make the world that you want. And there are many other powerful, rich people who do that, who work in ways that are very different from Elon and Bezos. And they go and do what they want. And many people would think that these other people are super positive and they're the right example of rich. And then other people will look at them and they'll be like, they're idiots. They're just wasting their money. Why feed the poor and the hungry? Like, let them die. They are just a drain on resources. This is what a lot of intelligent, cynical people will think about the
Yeah.
philanthropy. Use their money to feed the poor and the hungry. They're like, you're wasting resources. You're causing a drain on a world that is already overstretched. Like, let these people die. Who is right? Who is wrong? Who is good? Who is bad? Who is evil? Who is benevolent? Like, it's all so subjective. Do what you want with your money and your power. Find your alliance. Find your people who resonate. Not everyone has to think exactly the same, but everything pushes the world forward. Every use of power pushes the world forward. So, cynicism, basically, that's the real drain on the world, because that does nothing. It just sits and lets the world drown. It's an absolute waste of power. That is why I call it laziness, because it's an absolute waste of power.
Word. If you don't want to be lazy, if you want to reclaim your power, then catch that cynicism, make it stop. If that's something you're willing to do, write the words love, hope, and faith in the comments below. Tio, it's been incredible talking to you today. If you are interested in learning more about Tio, as we talked about earlier, his information is in the caption below, as is mine. We're going to be coming back in a few weeks with another episode. This is a 12 to 15 episode long series, so we're going to dive into a lot from here, but this has been rich. Make sure that you subscribe to both of our channels. Leave comments below, questions. If you have anything that you want us to explore, make sure that you state that in the comments too, and we'll look at it and perhaps include that in future episodes. And remember, you don't have to stay stuck in the zoo. You can experience the wild. You can break yourself free.